what she found was a £22 billion black hole this year. Now, she had a choice: pretend it isn't there, walk past it, or deal with it.
No, I just want to
deal with it.
Westminster woke up to political carnage. Overnight, Labour's image of stability crumbled into a full-blown implosion. What had been whispers of unrest escalated into a televised collapse that stunned the nation. At the centre of it all was Keir Starmer. Once sold as the man who would restore trust, he now sits at the heart of a scandal involving a jaw-dropping £22 billion sterling 0 pence in mismanaged funds. The sheer scale of the revelations blindsided even his inner circle. Within hours, more than 40 MPs abandoned their post in protest, sparking an exodus that shows no signs of slowing down.
Digging. Yeah! He's shown absolutely no regret, but everybody knows.
And these weren't junior backbenchers quietly slipping away. Veteran shadow ministers, key strategists, and long-standing loyalists were suddenly gone. Their departures weren't vague gestures of discontent, they came with evidence. Internal files, leaked contracts and payment trails exposed what looked less like sloppy management and more like a deliberate effort to funnel public money through murky networks of shell companies and phantom consultancies. What the leadership thought it could bury in private has now exploded into full public view. And as each leak surfaces, it's painting a picture of betrayal that cuts deeper than politics. It strikes at the very core of trust Labour once claimed to represent.
Insurance. We had to fill the £22 billion black hole that they left.
The chain reaction started with one leak, and it was devastating. A senior figure from Starmer's own inner circle unleashed a set of internal documents so detailed, so damning that the last threads of party unity snapped instantly. Those papers mapped out a hidden labyrinth of payments, shell contracts and off-the-books transactions that no amount of spin could explain away. Rees the first blow landed, others followed. Each resignation that came after wasn't just symbolic, it carried new files, new evidence and fresh outrage. Investigators quickly pieced together a pattern. Billions channeled through companies that barely existed on paper and so-called consultancy firm had been handed £3,400 million sterling, 0 pence, for Labour's digital operations. On inspection, it had no office, no staff and no public footprint. Its only trace led back to a close ally of Starmer who once steered his leadership campaign. Another contract worth over £1 billion was supposedly for grassroots mobilisation, yet not a single local branch reported contact with the firm involved. The deeper journalists and whistleblowers dug, the more grotesque the pattern became. Duplicate invoices, inflated figures, projects that never existed. It no longer resembled mismanagement. To many, it looked like a carefully coordinated operation to bleed funds under the cover of party business.
Mr. Speaker, the Chancellor claimed that her budget was a once-in-a-Parliament reset. So why are we having an emergency budget next week?
Mr. Speaker, we have delivered record investment into this country, had 3 interest rates cut in a row, and wages are going up faster than prices, which is a massive cost of living boost. That's after only 8 months, after 14 years of absolute failure. What do? Interest rates 11%, massive 22 million black hole in the economy. They crashed the economy. We're rebuilding Britain.
And all of this wasn't buried in old history. These deals were recent, signed off by people who had direct access to Starmer's office. That's why the outrage cut so deep. This wasn't an inherited mess, it was happening under his watch. As the leaks spread and resignations stacked up, the public reaction was instant and furious. Crowds formed outside Parliament within hours, carrying banners and demanding justice. For lifelong Labour supporters, the sense of betrayal was personal. Some went so far as to burn their membership cards in front of cameras, declaring they wanted nothing to do with a party drowning in scandal. This wasn't just social media noise. Hashtags like Labour collapse and Starmer scandal trended across every platform. But the outrage spilled well beyond screens. Anger filled the streets of London, Manchester and Liverpool, with chants demanding resignations at the very top. Inside Labour HQ, the panic was impossible to hide. Press officers scrambled through one emergency briefing after another, trying to control the firestorm. Yet every statement only seemed to pour more fuel on it. Claims that the documents were misleading collapsed under the weight of hard evidence. Suggestions that the resignations had been pre-planned fell flat. The facts were too visible, the leaks too damning. Meanwhile, MPs still clinging to their seats faced growing hostility from their own communities. The longer they stayed silent, the more they were accused of complicity. Even Labour's most loyal voter base began to drift, convinced the party had abandoned the values it once claimed to defend. The political cost hit almost immediately. Labour's poll numbers went into freefall, crashing below 20%, an unprecedented collapse for a party that only months ago was being called the government waiting. Overnight, the image of a strong opposition was replaced with one of a hollowed-out movement clinging to survival on union leaders, who had long been Labour's financial backbone, wasted no time in making their anger known. Several cut off donations indefinitely, warning that no money would flow until the leadership was purged and the finances laid bare. Across the country, local constituency offices locked their doors, suspending campaigns in protest. Meetings dissolved into shouting matches, with grassroots members demanding mass resignations at the top. Behind the scenes, whistleblowers hinted at an even bigger disaster waiting to surface. The £22 billion sterling 0 pence already exposed might be only a fraction of the real figure. Internal audits had been quietly blocked, emails deleted, and staff pressured not to cooperate with outside investigators. For many observers, this no longer looked like political negligence, it looked like a cover-up, one so extensive it could drag Starmer into uncharted territory. And through it all, the Labour leader himself was nowhere to be found. Starmer vanished from public appearances, cancelling interviews and refusing to face the press. His silence only deepened suspicions, leaving both his allies and his enemies to speculate whether he was preparing to step aside or stubbornly trying to ride out the storm. The storm didn't stay confined to Westminster. It swept into the grassroots, where the cracks turned into open rebellion. Local Labour groups across the country began issuing public statements of no confidence in Starmer's leadership. Entire branches in cities like Manchester, Liverpool and Birmingham shut down operations, suspending campaigns and demanding the leadership step aside. Inside these local chapters, emotions ran white hot. Long-standing members accused officials of staying silent while corruption festered in plain sight. In some northern constituencies, meetings descended into chaos. Members refused to attend unless their branches publicly distanced themselves from Starmer's team. Loyalty was no longer seen as strength, it was treated as complicity. The media wasted no time pouring petrol on the fire. Investigative journalists rolled out fresh revelations daily, tying Starmer's campaign allies to inflated contracts and phantom firms. One report uncovered 6 separate companies connected to former staffers from Labour's headquarters during his leadership bid. These firms collected millions under vague labels like strategic communications, yet no trace of real work could be found. Meanwhile, the few MPs still standing on the front benches struggled to answer questions from both reporters and furious constituents. Every attempt at damage control collapsed under the weight of new evidence. For those inside the party, the reality was clear. They weren't simply losing control of the narrative, they were losing the party itself. Just when Labour thought the chaos couldn't get worse, another leak landed like dynamite. This one wasn't about money, it was about control. An internal memo, codenamed Operation Firewall, surfaced and revealed a chilling strategy. Any MP who questioned the financial irregularities was to be sidelined, stripped of committee roles, denied media access, and quietly sabotaged if they ever sought candidacy again. The document proved what many already suspected. The cover-up wasn't accidental, it was deliberate. Whistleblowers weren't just ignored, they were punished. Integrity wasn't rewarded, it was crushed. For countless MPs and members who had clung to a thin hope of reform from within, this was the final straw. The betrayal wasn't only financial, it was systemic. The party's machinery had been twisted into a weapon, not to protect its values, but to shield misconduct and silence dissent. The fallout was instant. Calls for Starmer's resignation exploded into demands for a purge of everyone tied to the scandal. Veteran MPs who had spent their lives defending Labour broke down publicly, admitting they had encouraged new members to believe in a movement that had now been revealed as rotten at its core. Trade unions, the lifeblood of the party, officially joined the rebellion. General secretaries, one after another, released blistering statements, cutting support and calling for independent oversight of Labour's finances. Starmer's mandate hadn't just evaporated in Parliament, it had been shattered across the movement. The shockwaves soon spread beyond Labour itself, shaking the entire political map. Polls revealed an exodus of traditional Labour voters, many turning to Reform UK, the Liberal Democrats or even independents in constituencies that had been red strongholds for generations. One survey showed Labour's trust rating plunging to the lowest level in its modern history. The streets reflected the same collapse of confidence. Protests erupted across London, Manchester and Glasgow, with tens of thousands demanding accountability. Placards reading, "Where's the £22 billion sterling 0 pence?" and "Labour sold us out" filled the crowds. Viral videos of protesters confronting MPs outside constituency offices intensified the pressure. For many Labour voters, this wasn't just about politics anymore. It was about betrayal by a party they believed spoke for them. While the silence from Starmer only made things worse. He refused to step in front of cameras, leaving party spokespeople to issue vague assurances that everything was under review. But by then, no review could calm the fury. The outrage wasn't simmering anymore, it was boiling over. Behind the scenes, legal voices began circling. Ethics watchdogs and senior barristers warned the scandal had crossed into potential criminal territory. With every new revelation, it looked less like political incompetence and more like outright fraud. As protests filled the streets, the legal front grew just as dangerous. Parliament's standards watchdog confirmed an inquiry was already underway, while independent regulators demanded access to Labour's financial records spanning the last 3 years. Early reviews suggested the contracts in question weren't just suspicious. Some contained forged documents and fabricated service records. The Crown Prosecution Service began reviewing complaints tied to fraudulent contracts and obstruction of internal audits. For the first time in modern history, whispers grew that an opposition leader could face criminal charges while still in office. The prospect was unprecedented, yet the evidence piling up made it impossible to dismiss. Inside Labour HQ, crisis management turned into a lockdown. Staff were ordered to stay silent, security was tightened, and several employees were quietly suspended pending investigation. A special control unit seized communications, bypassing normal party channels. The atmosphere inside was suffocating. A bunker mentality where nobody trusted anyone else. And yet, through it all, Keir Starmer remained invisible. He cancelled appearances, avoided press conferences, and left spokespeople to deliver vague denials. His absence only deepened the sense that the leadership vacuum had become a sinkhole, pulling the entire party down with it. The rebellion at the grassroots level exploded into something bigger than anyone inside Labour headquarters could contain. In Northern England, an entire council resigned from the party at once, releasing a joint statement condemning the leadership as unrecognisable and corrupt. Their move set off a chain reaction, with local Labour chapters across the UK following suit, halting campaigns, passing no-confidence motions and demanding independent oversight. Community organisations that had built Labour's ground game for decades began to pull away. Donations dried up. Once safe Labour seats suddenly looked vulnerable, with lifelong supporters openly declaring they would never vote red again. The trust that took generations to build had evaporated in days. Then came the blow from Labour's own past. Former party grandees, figures who had shaped entire eras of the movement, publicly turned on the current leadership. One high-profile ex-leader described Starmer's administration as hijacked and rotten, calling for a total reset. Their words hit harder than any newspaper headline, sparking new protests and pushing even more MPs to distance themselves from Starmer's circle. What made matters worse was that the scandal no longer looked contained to Labour. Investigators found ties between some of the £22 billion sterling 0 pence contracts and lobbying groups with cross-party connections. Regulators hinted that the web of phantom firms might reach deeper into Westminster, threatening to expose a system-wide rot that went far beyond one party. By this stage, Labour's implosion had transformed into something larger, an institutional reckoning. Each day brought new whistleblowers stepping forward with files, emails and memos that widened the scope of the scandal. What began as a party crisis now looked like a threat to the entire political establishment. Inside Labour HQ, morale was gone. Staff were marched in and out under tightened security, instructed to say nothing and trust no one. Internal communications were rerouted through a crisis control team, bypassing the usual channels. The atmosphere was paralysed. Colleagues eyed one another with suspicion, unsure who might leak next or who would be forced to resign tomorrow. Resignation after resignation hollowed out the party's leadership. Any talk of interim plans for replacing Starmer fizzled immediately. Too many MPs were already tainted by association, and those who weren't wanted no part of inheriting a sinking ship. Each hour brought more walkouts, more backlash and more chaos. Meanwhile, outside the offices, protesters set up camp. They weren't leaving. Across Britain, radio shows and town halls were flooded with furious voters who had lost all faith, not just in Labour but in the political system itself. Polls confirmed the same. Nearly half of the country now said they trusted none of the major parties. Even rival MPs began demanding sweeping reform, calling for a full parliamentary commission to investigate party finances across the board. What once looked like Starmer's personal downfall had morphed into something far darker. A fear that Britain's political foundations might crumble once the floodlights revealed the full extent of the rot. And as the chaos deepened, one question echoed louder than all the rest. How deep does this betrayal really go, and who will fall next? Labour promised accountability, but instead delivered a £22 billion sterling 0p scandal that's tearing the party apart. With MPs fleeing, unions cutting ties and investigators circling, this isn't just Starmer's crisis, it's a reckoning for all of Westminster. And the question now isn't if Labour survives, but how many more will fall once the full truth comes out. Stay with us because the next revelations could change British politics forever.